Welcome to the family. If you enjoy powerful stories and wild adventures, subscribe now, hit like and share with someone who will love it too. Marcus Kane had been exploring the dense forests of Kepler 442b for 3 weeks, cataloguing flora and documenting the planet's ecosystem for the Colonial Survey team. The humid air clung to his environmental suit as he pushed through the twisted vines and bioluminescent undergrowth. This was supposed to be a routine scientific expedition, until the screaming started. The sound pierced through the alien jungle like a blade, high-pitched and desperate. It wasn't the territorial call of some predator or the mating cry of an unknown species. This was pain, pure, unfiltered agony that spoke to something primal in Marcus's human consciousness. He froze, his hand instinctively moving to the plasma, rifle slung across his back. The screams came again, weaker this time, carrying a distinctly feminine quality that made his stomach clench. Every instinct told him to call for backup, to follow protocol, and wait for the military escort that was scheduled to check on him in 6 hours. But the screams were fading. Marcus adjusted his suit's audio sensors, triangulating the source. 2 kilometers northeast, in a clearing he'd marked on his survey map but hadn't yet explored. He checked his equipment, rifle charged, medical kit secured, emergency beacon active. His training screamed at him to wait, but his humanity demanded action. The jungle grew denser as he moved toward the sound, following game trails that wound between massive trees whose bark glowed with phosphorescent patterns. Strange creatures skittered away from his approach, 6-legged things with crystalline shells that chimed like wind bells as they fled. As he drew closer, the screaming stopped entirely, replaced by something worse, the sound of voices. Guttural, harsh syllables that carried the unmistakable tone of celebration. Laughter. Marcus crept to the edge of a natural clearing, his rifle ready, and peered through the dense foliage. What he saw made his blood run cold. In the center of the clearing, a primitive cooking fire burned bright orange against the alien twilight. Arranged around it were a dozen humanoid creatures, their skin mottled green and brown like tree bark. They stood upright like humans but were taller, with elongated limbs and faces that jutted forward in pronounced snouts filled with yellowed teeth. But it wasn't the aliens that stopped Marcus's breath. It was what hung above the fire. Suspended from a crude wooden frame was a young female of a species he'd never encountered. Her skin was pale blue with silver markings that seemed to shift in the firelight. She was clearly sentient. Her large, dark eyes tracked the movements of her captors with intelligent awareness. Her body was slight, almost delicate, and she couldn't have been more than the equivalent of a human teenager. The tribal aliens were slowly lowering her toward the flames, adjusting the height with practiced precision. They weren't killing her quickly. They were cooking her alive, savoring her suffering. One of the creatures poked at the fire with a sharpened stick, sending sparks dancing upward. The alien girl's mouth opened in a soundless scream. Her vocal cords must have given out. But her eyes held a desperate plea that transcended species barriers. Marcus had studied xenobiology for 8 years. He knew about convergent evolution, about how intelligence could emerge in countless forms across the galaxy. But he'd never seen anything quite like this moment of recognition, one sentient being acknowledging another across the vast gulf of species difference. The tribal aliens chittered among themselves, their excitement building as they prepared for their feast. They had no idea they were being watched. No idea that a human, a species they'd likely never encountered, was calculating angles, checking ammunition, and preparing to do what humans did best when faced with cruelty. Marcus Kane was about to introduce these primitive aliens to the concept of human intervention. Marcus counted 12 hostiles, all armed with crude weapons, bone spears, stone clubs, and what looked like blow darts. They were focused entirely on their victim, their primitive minds consumed by the anticipation of their meal. It was exactly the kind of tactical mistake that had cost countless species their lives when they first encountered humanity. He activated his suit's tactical display, marking each target and calculating optimal firing positions. The plasma rifle could drop all 12 in less than 30 seconds, but the girl was positioned directly in the line of fire. One stray shot could kill her as easily as her captors. The largest of the tribal aliens, likely their leader, approached. the suspended girl with a curved blade that gleamed wetly in the firelight. He was going to start carving while she was still alive. Marcus moved. He burst from the undergrowth like a force of nature, his rifle spitting coherent energy that turned the evening air electric blue. The first 3 aliens died before they even registered his presence, their bodies vaporizing in brilliant flashes of superheated plasma. The remaining creatures scattered with inhuman shrieks, but Marcus was already moving, his enhanced reflexes and tactical training making him a whirlwind of controlled violence. He rolled left as a spear whistled past his head, came up firing, and watched 2 more aliens crumple to the ground. The leader bellowed something in his guttural language and charged with his curved blade raised high. Marcus sidestepped the clumsy attack and drove the stock of his rifle into the creature's elongated skull. The impact made a sound like breaking pottery. 7 down, 5 remaining. The survivors had found cover behind the crude cooking apparatus, using their victim as an unwitting shield. Marcus could see the terror in the girl's eyes as energy bolts sizzled through the air around her. She understood what was happening, understood that someone was fighting for her. One of the aliens raised a blow dart to his lips. Marcus put a plasma bolt through his chest before he could fire. The creature toppled backward, his weapon clattering uselessly to the ground. 4 left, Marcus muttered, his voice distorted by his suit's vocal modulator. He sounded like death itself speaking through electronic static. The remaining aliens began to panic, their primitive pack tactics falling apart in the face of superior firepower and training. They broke cover simultaneously, rushing Marcus from different angles. It was a desperate move born of fear rather than strategy. Marcus's rifle hummed as he fired in a controlled burst pattern, left, center, right. 3 more aliens fell in rapid succession, their bodies smoking in the humid air. The last one tripped over his fallen comrade and scrambled backward on all 4s, gibbering in terror. Marcus approached slowly, his rifle trained on the cowering creature. The alien's eyes were wide with shock. He'd probably never encountered anything that could slaughter his entire tribe in under 2 minutes. In his primitive mind, Marcus wasn't just another species. He was a demon, a force of supernatural retribution. Alien tried to speak, his guttural voice cracking with fear. Marcus didn't understand the words, but the meaning was clear. Mercy. Begging. Marcus considered it. His training said to eliminate all threats. His scientific background argued for preserving a specimen for study. But his humanity, the part of him that had driven him to intervene in the first place, demanded something else entirely. He gestured toward the jungle with his rifle. The alien understood immediately, scrambling to his feet and fleeing into the darkness. Marcus could have killed him easily, but sometimes mercy was a more powerful message than violence. Let the survivor spread the word. Humans had come to this world, and they did not tolerate cruelty. With the immediate threat neutralized, Marcus turned his attention to the girl. She hung motionless in her bonds, her large eyes tracking his every movement. There was still fear there, but also something else. Hope. Marcus slung his rifle and approached the crude apparatus. The heat from the fire had already begun to burn her legs, and he could see blisters forming on her pale blue skin. Her breathing was shallow and rapid, shock setting in. "Easy," he said softly, his voice synthesizer automatically modulating to what his suit's AI determined was a calming frequency. "I'm going to get you down." She couldn't understand his words, but his tone seemed to reach her. Her eyes closed, in what might have been relief, and for the first time since he'd found her, she looked almost peaceful. Marcus began working on her restraints, his hands steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through his system. He had saved her life, but the real challenge was just beginning. Now he had to keep her alive. The girl's restraints were a complex web of woven plant fibers designed to keep her suspended, while allowing the heat to reach her body evenly. Marcus's combat knife made quick work of the bonds, but he had to support her weight as she collapsed, her legs too burned and weak to hold her. She was lighter than he'd expected, her alien physiology apparently more delicate than human norms. As he lowered her gently to the ground away from the fire, he got his first close look at her species biology. Her skin was indeed pale blue with intricate silver markings that seemed to pulse faintly with her heartbeat. Her face was more angular than human, with high cheekbones and a narrow chin, but her expressions were remarkably familiar. Pain, fear, gratitude, emotions that transcended species barriers. Her most striking feature was her eyes. They were larger than human eyes, completely black except for flecks of gold that caught the firelight. When she looked at him, Marcus felt an odd sensation, as if she was seeing deeper than most humans ever could. She tried to speak, her voice a melodic whisper that sounded like wind chimes. The suit's translation protocol kicked in, but came back with error messages. Her language was completely unknown to the human databases. Marcus activated his medical scanner and ran it over her injuries. The burns on her legs were second degree, but treatable. More concerning was her core temperature, dangerously low for her species according to the scanner's best guess. She was going into shock. He pulled emergency thermal blankets from his medical kit and wrapped them around her carefully. She flinched at first, then seemed to understand that he was helping her. Her large eyes never left his face, studying him with obvious intelligence. "I'm human," Marcus said, pointing to himself. "My name is Marcus." She tilted her head, processing the foreign sounds. Then, surprising him, she pointed to herself and spoke a single word: Kira. The translation software immediately flagged it as a proper noun, a name. First contact protocols demanded that he document everything, but Marcus found himself more concerned with basic medical care than xenolinguistic breakthroughs. He began treating her burns with bioregenerative gel from his kit. She hissed at the initial contact, then relaxed as the medication began numbing the pain. Her breathing gradually stabilized, and some color returned to her pale blue skin. While he worked, Marcus's mind raced through the implications of what he'd witnessed. The tribal aliens had clearly been preparing to eat Kira, which suggested she wasn't native to this world, or at least not this region. Her technology level appeared more advanced than her captors, based on the subtle synthetic fibers woven into what remained of her clothing. Kira watched his every movement with fascination, occasionally reaching out tentatively to touch his environmental suit. When her fingers made contact with the material, she jerked back in surprise, then leaned forward to examine it more closely. Marcus realized she was studying him as intently as he was studying her. To her, he was just as alien and impossible as she was to him. The difference was that he'd rescued her, creating a bond that went deeper than species classification. His communicator chimed with an incoming message from base camp. The military escort was checking in early, concerned about some energy signatures their satellites had detected. Marcus had maybe 20 minutes before they arrived with their protocols and their procedures, turning this moment of connection into a formal first contact scenario. He looked at Kira, who was now sitting up despite her injuries, her attention focused on the bodies scattered around the clearing. Her expression was unreadable, but Marcus thought he detected satisfaction mixed with something darker, perhaps relief that her tormentors were dead. She spoke again, a longer phrase this time, accompanied by gestures toward the dead aliens and then toward Marcus. The translation software caught fragments: gratitude, debt, something that might have been friendship. Marcus made a decision that would haunt and define the rest of his life. Instead of waiting for the military escort to arrive and take control of the situation, he helped Kira to her feet and gestured toward the jungle. "Can you walk?" he asked, supporting her weight. She seemed to understand his meaning, if not his words. She took a tentative step, winced, then nodded with determination. Whatever species she belonged to, they shared humanity's stubborn refusal to give up. Together they disappeared into the alien forest just as the first military shuttles appeared on the horizon. Marcus had chosen to protect his new friend from the bureaucracy that would surely follow, not knowing that this decision would lead to consequences that would shake the foundations of human space exploration. Behind them, the fire continued to burn, illuminating the scattered remains of a primitive hunting party that had learned too late that some prey fought back. 3 days had passed since Marcus had helped Kira escape into the jungle, and he was beginning to understand the magnitude of his decision. His emergency beacon remained offline, his scheduled check-ins ignored. By now, the military escort would have found the clearing and the bodies. They'd be conducting a full search, probably assuming he was dead or captured. But Marcus felt more alive than he had in years. Kira had led him to a hidden cave system deep in the forest, a natural shelter that showed signs of recent habitation. Her temporary camp was a marvel of survival engineering: water collection systems made from hollow plant stems, bedding woven from soft mosses, and food storage that kept local fruits fresh for days. She was clearly not native to this world, but she'd adapted to it with remarkable ingenuity. Marcus found himself impressed by her resourcefulness, even as he struggled to communicate with her, through gestures and the few words his translation software had managed to decode. On the second day, she'd surprised him by producing a small device from her salvaged belongings, a crystalline tablet that projected holographic images when activated. Through a series of pictures and symbols, she began to tell him her story. The images showed a sleek spacecraft, clearly more advanced than anything in the human fleet. Then destruction, explosions, fire, figures in environmental suits attacking the ship. Pirates, Marcus realized. Kira's vessel had been attacked and destroyed, leaving her stranded on this primitive world. She showed him images of her capture by the tribal aliens, their crude attempts to communicate, and their eventual decision to treat her as food, rather than as a fellow intelligent being. Marcus's jaw clenched as he watched the holographic recreation of her torment. But then came the part that made him understand why she'd chosen to trust him. The final images showed Marcus himself, bursting from the jungle like an avenging angel, his plasma rifle cutting down her captors with deadly efficiency. In Kira's rendering, he looked almost mythical, a warrior of light bringing justice to the darkness. She'd been watching him longer than he'd realized, studying his behavior, evaluating his character. Her decision to reveal her sanctuary to him hadn't been impulsive. It had been calculated based on her assessment that he was trustworthy. Now, as they sat together in the cave while rain drummed against the entrance, Marcus was beginning to piece together more of her story. Her species, the Vaelti, according to the few words he'd managed to translate, were apparently peaceful traders and explorers. The attack on her ship had been unprovoked, motivated by greed rather than territorial conflict. Kira activated her device again, showing him star charts and navigation data. She was trying to explain where she'd come from, but the scale was staggering. Her home system was nearly 100 light-years away, far beyond the current range of human exploration. Marcus realized he was looking at first contact with a spacefaring civilization that humanity hadn't even known existed. The implications were enormous: trade possibilities, cultural exchange, technological advancement, everything the colonial administration dreamed of. But there was a problem. Kira's crystalline device was more than just a data storage unit. It was a distress beacon, broadcasting her location to any Vaelti ships that might be searching for her. She'd activated it the day after their escape, hoping for rescue. What she didn't know, and what Marcus was only beginning to understand, was that human deep space monitoring stations would also be tracking that signal. The colonial administration would identify it as alien technology and scramble every available ship to investigate. First contact was coming whether they wanted it or not, and Marcus found himself in the unique position of being humanity's unofficial ambassador to an alien species. Everything he did in the next few days could determine whether humanity's first meeting with the Vaelti would be peaceful or catastrophic. That evening, as Kira slept curled against the cave wall, Marcus made another decision that would change everything. He activated his emergency communicator and sent a carefully worded message to Colonial Command. "This is Survey Team Leader Marcus Kane. I am alive and unharmed. I have made contact with a non-hostile alien individual in need of medical assistance. Request immediate diplomatic contact rather than military response. The situation is delicate and requires careful handling. Will maintain radio silence until I receive confirmation that diplomatic protocols are in effect. Kane out." He powered down the communicator before they could respond, knowing that his message would cause chaos in the command structure. But it was the right thing to do. Kira deserved better than to be treated as a specimen or a potential threat. She deserved to be treated as what she was, a person who had suffered, survived, and chosen to trust in the goodness of a complete stranger. That trust was something Marcus would protect, even if it cost him his career. Outside the cave, something howled in the alien night, a sound that spoke of predators and dangers yet unknown. But inside their sanctuary, Human and Vaelti slept peacefully, two representatives of their species, finding common ground in the vast darkness between the stars. The diplomatic shuttle arrived on the fourth day, but it wasn't alone. Marcus watched from the cave entrance as 3 ships descended through the cloud cover, one sleek civilian vessel marked with colonial administration insignia, and 2 military escorts that looked ready for war. Kira stood beside him, her expression unreadable as she studied the human spacecraft. Her own distress beacon continued to pulse from deep within the cave, still broadcasting its alien signal into the void. "They're not exactly subtle, are they?" Marcus muttered, though he knew Kira couldn't understand his words. She seemed to grasp his meaning anyway, her large dark eyes reflecting his own concern. His communicator crackled to life with an incoming transmission. "Survey Team Leader Kane, this is Diplomatic Attaché Reynolds aboard the CSS Meridian. We've received your message and are prepared to establish formal first contact protocols. Please provide your coordinates for immediate extraction." Marcus keyed his mic. "Negative, Reynolds. The situation requires a more delicate approach. I'm transmitting coordinates for a meeting site 1 kilometer from my current position. Come alone unarmed and bring medical supplies. The alien individual has been injured and requires treatment." There was a long pause before Reynolds responded. "Kane, I have orders to bring you both back for full debriefing. The military advisors are concerned about—" "The military advisors can express their concerns from orbit," Marcus interrupted. "You want first contact? You do it on my terms or you don't do it at all. I'm the one who's been living with her for 4 days. I'm the one she trusts. Don't screw this up by coming in with guns blazing." Another pause, longer this time. Marcus could almost hear the frantic consultations taking place aboard the diplomatic vessel. Finally, Reynolds came back on the channel. "Agreed. I'll meet you at the coordinates in 1 hour. But Kane, if this goes badly, it's on your head." Marcus looked at Kira, who had been listening to the exchange with obvious intelligence despite not understanding the words. She'd learned to read his expressions over the past few days, and she could tell something significant was about to happen. He activated her holographic device and gestured toward the ships visible through the cave entrance, then pointed to himself and made walking motions. She understood immediately. More humans were coming and he was going to meet with them. Her reaction surprised him. Instead of fear or excitement, she looked almost sad. She touched his arm gently and spoke a phrase in her melodic language that his translator caught fragments of "friend leaving danger." She was worried about him. After everything she'd been through, capture, torture, near death, she was concerned for his safety. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, an emotion he hadn't experienced since losing his wife in the colony ship disaster 5 years ago. It wasn't romantic love, but it was love nonetheless, the deep affection that develops between beings who have shared danger and found trust in each other's character. He took her hands in his, marveling at how similar they were to human hands, despite the subtle differences: longer fingers, skin that felt like silk over steel, the faint luminescence of her silver markings. "I'll come back," he said, knowing she couldn't understand the words but hoping she could read the promise in his voice. "I won't let them hurt you." She seemed to understand. She released his hands and retreated deeper into the cave, trusting him to handle whatever was coming. The meeting site was a natural clearing about halfway between the cave and where the human ships had landed. Marcus arrived first, checking his equipment and trying to prepare for what could be the most important conversation in human history. Reynolds appeared exactly on schedule, emerging from the jungle in a pristine diplomatic uniform that looked absurdly formal in the alien wilderness. He was younger than Marcus had expected, probably in his early 30s, with the kind of smooth confidence that came from never having been punched in the face by reality. "Kane," Reynolds said, extending his hand. "Thank you for maintaining contact. The administration is very excited about this development." Marcus shook the offered hand but didn't return the smile. Cut the diplomatic pleasantries, Reynolds. What are your real orders? The younger man's expression flickered. Full cultural and technological assessment, establishment of communication, protocols and determination of potential threat levels, standard first contact procedure. And if I refuse to cooperate, Reynolds's smile faded entirely, then we proceed without your cooperation. Kane, you've done excellent work here, but this is bigger than one survey team leader and his personal relationship with an alien. This could change the entire future of human expansion. Marcus nodded slowly. You're right. It could. That's exactly why I'm not going to let you people turn her into a lab rat or a propaganda tool. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that you treat her like what she is, a sentient being with rights, dignity, and her own agenda. She's not a specimen to be studied or a resource to be exploited. She's a person, and she deserves to be treated as such. Reynolds studied him for a long moment. You've grown attached to her. I've grown to respect her, Marcus corrected. There's a difference. Now, are you ready to meet her properly, or should I tell her that humanity isn't mature enough for real diplomacy? The question hung in the air between them like a challenge. In the distance, the alien sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold that existed nowhere else in the known universe. Kira emerged from the jungle like a figure from a dream, moving with the fluid grace that Marcus had come to associate with her species. Reynolds actually gasped when he saw her, his diplomatic composure cracking in the face of humanity's first living alien contact. She'd prepared for this meeting with obvious care. Her remaining clothing had been cleaned and repaired as much as possible, and she'd woven local flowers into her hair in what Marcus recognized as a formal gesture among her people. Despite everything she'd endured, she was determined to make a good first impression. Marcus stepped forward to make introductions, but Kira surprised both humans by speaking first. She'd been practicing, he realized, working with the translation, software in his equipment to prepare a simple greeting, in accented but recognizable English. "Hello," she said, her musical voice making the simple word sound like poetry. "I am grateful to meet you." Reynolds stood frozen for several seconds, apparently overwhelmed by the reality of what was happening. Marcus nudged him gently, and the diplomat finally remembered his training. "The honor is ours," Reynolds said, speaking slowly and clearly. "I am James Reynolds, representing the Colonial Administration of Earth. We welcome you in peace." Kira tilted her head, processing the formal language. Then she smiled, an expression that was unmistakably universal despite the subtle differences in her facial structure. "Earth?" she repeated. "Your homeworld?" "Yes," Reynolds nodded. "Where's your home?" Instead of answering directly, Kira activated her holographic device. The star chart materialized between them, showing her home system in relation to their current position. Reynolds leaned forward, his eyes widening as he absorbed the implications of the display. "This is incredible," he breathed. "The technology, the navigational data. Do you realize what this represents?" Marcus stepped closer to Kira, a protective gesture that wasn't lost on either of them. "She represents a person who was tortured by primitives and rescued by a human. Don't lose sight of that in your excitement about technological advantages." Kira seemed to sense the tension between the two men. She touched Marcus's arm gently, then addressed Reynolds again. "Marcus, I saved my life," she said carefully. "He is a good person, honorable. Your people, are they like him?" The question caught Reynolds off guard. He looked between Kira and Marcus, apparently beginning to understand the dynamics at play. "We try to be," he said finally, "though we don't always succeed." Over the next hour, the three of them worked to establish basic communication protocols. Kira's holographic device proved invaluable, allowing her to share images and concepts that bridged the language barrier. Reynolds took detailed notes, his diplomatic training finally kicking in as he realized the historic nature of the moment. Kira told them more about her people. The Vaelti were indeed peaceful traders and explorers, with settlements scattered across dozens of star systems. Her ship had been carrying cultural artifacts and scientific data when it was attacked by pirates. apparently a multi-species criminal organization that preyed on isolated vessels. "We thought we were safe," she explained haltingly. "The pirates, they did not want trade. They wanted destruction, pleasure in causing pain." Her words sent a chill through both humans. Marcus had seen the aftermath of the pirate attack in her holographic records, but hearing her describe it in person made it more real, more personal. Reynolds asked careful questions about Vaelti technology and culture, maintaining his diplomatic protocols while clearly being fascinated by every answer. But Marcus noticed that Kira's responses were becoming more guarded as the conversation continued. Finally, she addressed the issue directly. "You ask many questions about my people," she said to Reynolds. "What do you want from us, the diplomats?" Smooth Mask slipped slightly. "We're interested in establishing peaceful relations, cultural exchange, perhaps trade agreements." "You want our technology," Kira said simply. It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact. Reynolds had the grace to look embarrassed. "Among other things, yes, but we also genuinely want friendship between our peoples." Kira considered this for a long moment, her dark eyes studying both humans. Then she made a decision that would reshape the future of human-Vaelti relations. "I will speak to my people about yours," she said. "But first, I must know. Will you help me get home?" Reynolds glanced at Marcus, clearly uncomfortable with making promises he couldn't keep, but Marcus stepped forward without hesitation. "Yes," he said firmly, "whatever it takes." Kira smiled again, that radiant expression that seemed to light up the alien twilight. "Then we will be friends. Your species and mine." In the distance, her distress beacon continued its patient broadcast, calling across the void to ships that were already on their way. But now, instead of a rescue mission, they would be coming to participate in humanity's first formal diplomatic contact with an alien civilization. And it was all because one human had heard screaming in the darkness and decided to follow the sound. 6 months later, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the Vaelti vessel Whisperwind, watching Earth's blue marble grow larger in the view screen. The journey to Kira's homeworld and back had been the adventure of several lifetimes, but now it was almost over. The diplomatic mission had exceeded everyone's expectations. The Vaelti High Council had been fascinated by humanity's combination of curiosity and protectiveness, especially after Kira shared the story of her rescue. What had started as a simple first contact had evolved into a comprehensive cultural and technological exchange program. Marcus had been appointed as the first human ambassador to the Vaelti Confederation, a role that required him to spend equal time on both Earth and in Vaelti space. It was exactly the kind of career he'd never imagined wanting, but somehow couldn't. Imagine living without. Kira joined him at the viewport, moving with the easy grace he'd never stopped admiring. Her injuries had healed completely during their time among her people, but she still bore faint scars on her legs, reminders of the cruelty she'd endured and the compassion that had saved her. "Your world is beautiful," she said in perfect English. Her linguistic abilities had proven remarkable, and she now spoke several human languages fluently. "Not as beautiful as some I've seen recently," Marcus replied, thinking of the crystal cities of Vaelti Prime and the singing forests of their colonial worlds. She smiled at the compliment, then grew serious. "Are you certain about your decision? You could have a comfortable life here, among your own people." Marcus had been offered a promotion to head the new Xenological Studies Department, a position that would have made him one of the most powerful people in the colonial administration. He'd turned it down without hesitation. "My own people are scattered across half the galaxy now," he said. "Besides, someone needs to make sure the cultural exchange programs stay focused on actual exchange rather than exploitation." It was a diplomatic way of saying that he'd already seen human bureaucrats eyeing Vaelti technology with greedy eyes, looking for ways to gain advantages over other human colonies. The same mentality that had driven humanity to the stars in the first place: competition, expansion, the assumption that resources existed to be claimed. Kira understood the subtext. "Some of my people have similar concerns about yours. They wonder if humans can be trusted with advanced technology. What do you tell them?" She looked at him with those remarkable dark eyes, and for a moment he was transported back to that night in the jungle when he'd first seen her suspended over the fire, pleading silently for help. I tell them about a human who heard screaming and followed the sound even though it meant danger. I tell them about a species that produces individuals willing to risk everything for strangers. She paused, then added quietly, I tell them about you. The ship's intercom chimed with an announcement in the melodic Vaelti language, then repeated in English. Approaching Earth orbital space. All passengers and diplomatic personnel prepare for station transfer. Marcus felt a familiar mixture of excitement and trepidation. The return delegation included 12 Vaelti diplomats, scientists, and cultural observers, the largest alien presence ever to visit human space. Their reception would set the tone for everything that followed. Nervous? Kira asked, reading his expression with the skill she'd developed over months of friendship. Terrified, Marcus admitted. There are so many ways this could go wrong. But also many ways it could go right. She placed her hand on his arm in the gesture of comfort that had become natural between them. We've already succeeded in the most important thing, which is, we've proven that different species can understand each other, can care about each other, can choose compassion over fear. She gestured toward the viewport, where Earth now filled most of their field of vision. Everything else is just details. Marcus nodded, feeling some of his tension ease. She was right, of course. The formal diplomatic protocols, the trade agreements, the technological exchanges, all of that was secondary to the fundamental breakthrough they'd already achieved. The shuttle bay doors opened to reveal the docking port of Orbital Station 7, humanity's primary deep space facility. Through the transparent aluminum walls, Marcus could see crowds of reporters, diplomats, and curiosity seekers waiting for their first glimpse of living aliens. As they prepared to disembark, Kira turned to him one last time. Thank you, she said simply. For what? For following the screams, for choosing to help instead of walking away, for showing me that there are good people in the universe, regardless of what species they belong to. Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. Thank you for trusting me, for giving humanity a chance to prove we're worthy of friendship. They walked through the airlock together, human and Vaelti, ambassador, and rescued, friends who had bridged the gap between worlds through simple acts of courage and compassion. Behind them, the stars wheeled in their eternal dance, indifferent to the small dramas of sentient life. But among those countless points of light, something new had been born, a connection between species that would grow and strengthen over the generations to come, all because one human had heard screaming in an alien jungle and decided that suffering was suffering, regardless of who was doing the suffering. In the end, that was what made humanity special among the stars, not their technology or their aggression, but their stubborn refusal to ignore injustice when they encountered it. It was a trait that would serve them well in the vast community of galactic civilization they were about to join. The age of humanity's expansion into the stars had begun, not with conquest, but with compassion, and that made all the difference. The end.